Welcome to week 2 of Money Smart for Older Adults. Welcome back to those of you who are here for week 1, and welcome to those of you who are new this week. Again, my name is Carl Burlbaugh, and I'm the Assistant Director for the Elder Financial Safety Center. And this is our financial education and literacy program. It's a 4-week course. As I said, we're in week 2, and today we will be hearing from our financial experts here at the Elder Financial Safety Center, Steve Benton, followed by Debbie Burkham.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to week 2, as Carl said. And what we're going to be talking about, first of all, is financial planning for and in retirement. So preparation for and while you're in retirement. And you see the focus word there is definitely plan. You know, when I turned 65, I had my best friend come up to me and say, "Welcome to the metallic age." And I said, "The metallic age, what is that?" And he said, "That's when you have gold in your teeth, silver in your hair, and lead in your rear end." And I said, "Well, that's really appropriate, really is." But the operative word here is plan. And so let's get into it. Basic risk of retirement, okay? And I've highlighted 6 of them here. And the first one is longevity risk. Will I outlive my money? Age expectancy continues to rise, and it's primarily due to advances in healthcare. When you think about the last 20 years and the advances specifically in 2 areas, the heart and cancer. And people are living longer even though they have those issues, whereas before they didn't make it past a certain age group. You also have the decline in smoking. People gave up smoking several decades ago to the most part, and so you're seeing the advantages there. And then the focus on fitness. And so you see all those working together, and people are very frankly living longer. And a good example of that is my brother-in-law. He got stage 4 cancer, was diagnosed, and my wife and her sister began planning funeral expenses for him, and he's lived 4 more years. And so he's done stem cell and all sorts of things and is doing quite well. So he's a good example of what's going on. So we are living longer, and we're going to spend some time a little bit on the demographics and what that challenge is of living longer. The second one I've got up there is investment risk. As we age gracefully together, we run out of time to make up significant market decreases. So we're going to talk about that, how you need to get more and more conservative as time goes on as we age. And because we don't have that time to make up these big dips in the market, and very frankly, there could be one coming shortly. Inflation risk, it's kind of strange to talk about inflation now. I used to have to explain inflation to people because I didn't quite understand what it was because it was so tame for so long. And so I would say, "Do you remember 26-cent gasoline?" And of course, everybody in the audience remembered 26-cent gasoline and what it is today and so forth. But this last year and a half, we are definitely experiencing some dramatic inflation increases. It's on steroids right now. And many of you all saw your Social Security increase 8.7% last year, trying to reflect that cost of living increase. So inflation is a big risk of retirement because your dollars buy less and less as time goes on. And so that's very important. Healthcare risk, we don't know what challenges may be coming our way. And so you've got to kind of be prepared because that is a big expense of retirement time. People think, "Oh, I'm on Medicare, it's free." But those of you that are on Medicare realize it's not free. There's Plan B to pay for. There's prescriptions that are expensive. And if you have a supplemental Medicare policy, you're running some pretty good expenses. And that's really conducive to the senior group. And financial exploitation risk. We do a whole series on scams and frauds. I think y'all started out there last week. And I tell you what, the financial exploitation is getting worse and worse. As seniors get more vulnerable as they age, they become the target of the con artist. And the reason is your cognitive faculties are going down, and also you have a big target on your back because 70% of all the assets in the United States are owned by baby boomers and above. And the youngest baby boomer is turning 60 next year. So here we are, the 60-year-olds all the way up own 70% of the assets. So what did They say about Willie Sutton, when he was asked, why do we rob banks? He says that's where the money is. So the money is in the hands of the seniors, and they're getting less and less technologically efficient, and they are vulnerable to exploitation. So that is a big risk. And then finally, the risk of feeling irrelevant. This is the real challenge for most people retiring. They think, oh, great, I'm going to play golf every day and go to the lake every day and things like that, and it just doesn't work out that way. They get bored very quickly, and that's why we have a very robust volunteer program here at the Senior Source, that if you haven't explored that, you certainly should. There's plenty of opportunities for you there. Let's look at what's called the baby boomers, the silver tsunami, because they're impacting everything. When you think about, they're called the pig and the python, the silver tsunami, they have affected diapers, schools, college. They've been the consumers extraordinaire. You may not realize that the GDP here in the United States is 70% consumer spending. And so they were the consumers extraordinaire. They love to spend money, and they've been doing that for years and years. And then now we have 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every single day of the year. So they're having a huge impact now on retirement and the funds that are available. So Medicare, Social Security, we have to really understand their behavior because it is going to have impact. Looking at the stats there, at 65, once a person turns 65, you know, the metallic age, did I tell you that joke? Okay, we did. 1 out of 10 will live, well, let's say average life expectancy is to age 85. So if you reach 65, there's a good chance you're going to reach 85. So that's 20 more years. And again, that longevity risk is definitely there. 1 out of 10 will live to 95. And you'll see we're into numbers today. The median savings of investments is $202,000 that they have set aside. And is that going to last 20 years, subsidizing their Social Security and so forth? So baby boomers are woefully prepared. The average Social Security check here in 2023 is $1,827 per month. Now, what's interesting about these baby boomers, they're the first demographic ever to reach retirement and still have mortgages. That's never happened before. People tended to reach retirement and their houses were paid for. And also people used to die earlier. And so now you've got the double whammy of people are living longer and they're still in debt. We'll talk about that. All right, let's talk a little bit about this demographic. The 65 plus is the fastest growing demographic, and that's because of these baby boomers. And you see the stats there. I won't go through them, but you can see by 2040, the 65 plus demographic is going to be nearly 22% of the population. That's more than 1 of every 5 people. So we are an aging population. The whole world is aging the same way. And then look at that statistic down at the bottom. 85 plus are actually experiencing a 4-fold growth between that 40-year period. So again, if you reach 65, there's a good chance you're going to reach 85. And so we're going to see that 4-fold growth that hasn't been there before. And so people are living longer. I think I've made that deal. If you want some evidence of proof, if you will, here's a stunning statistic for you. In just a few short years, the manufacturing and sales of adult diapers are going to exceed the sales of infant diapers. Can you believe that? And so that shows you, that kind of proves what's happening with our demographic. Now, how many of you know somebody that's made it to 100? And people are nodding, maybe in your family, maybe in your neighborhood or whatever. Remember Willard Scott on the Today Show? They used to make a big deal about reaching 100. And my aunt in McKinney, she lived to 103. And every morning she woke up and said, I'm still here, darn. And so now it's not uncommon. And here's a lady that just turned 100 and she's not very happy. And the reason is when you turn 100, you can't play with Legos anymore. Okay? And you're saying, what's he talking about? And it's right there on the box when it pops up. Ages 4 to 99. So they take away your Legos and you're adrift. So one more slide on what's going on with our demographics, and you'll see the baby boomers there, they impacted everything. Then we had the Gen X, And now we have these millennials, and they're nearly as big as the baby boomers. And there's a great tension that is growing between those millennials and the baby boomers who, as I said, are going to be 60 and above starting next year. And you hear this expression, okay, boomer, because we have the way we say things, and they just kind of roll their eyes and say, okay, boomer. Now we're known as the greedy geezers, okay? So you see this tension because they're fighting over money. The old adage, we used to say youth is wasted on the young. They have one that says financial resources are being wasted on the old. And so you can see we're going to have to fight for every dollar we get out of the government. And so, well, we got 22% of the population. We should keep voting and hopefully have a say in things. But here's the problem. The biggest fear of the older adult is surprisingly not death, okay? It's running out of money. And that is the big fear. We do a lot of, Debbie and I do a lot of financial counseling and coaching, and we always get the question after we've worked with them, they say, well, I have enough money. And we always say, well, that's a simple equation. We've looked at your income. We know exactly how much money you got coming in. We know your assets that are eventually going to have to be liquidated to subsidize any shortfall in your budget. And there's only one part of the equation missing, and what is that? Date of death, okay? Because nobody knows. And so you really can't figure it out. So we have an old country expression, get all you can all you get, and sit on the lid. And so basically that's financial planning basic 101 is just get all the money you can and get it saved because you're going to need it because you're going to be living longer. So let's get into financial planning. And here's a sign that really tells its own story. Plan ahead. What's the old carpenter's rule? Measure twice, cut once, okay? Carefully plan before you take action. It was Ben Franklin that said, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And then that great wisdom of Yogi Berra, he says, if you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up someplace else. And so you've got to plan ahead. And then the consummate investor Warren Buffett, he says, someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. And so you've got to plan for the future. And you're going to see this same sign when I come back in 2 weeks and talk about end-of-life planning. And there it is again, plan ahead. If you want things to happen the way you want them to happen, you got to plan. You can't just willy-nilly hope that they follow your instructions. All right, what is financial planning? We'll start with some solid foundation, the basics. First of all, establish an emergency fund. You know, an emergency fund is basically life is what happens while we're making other plans. And so what the equation is, you take your monthly gross income, your gross income that's coming in, and if you're single, multiply that times 3, okay? Multiply that times 3, and that's how much you should have in what you call your emergency fund. Now, you don't leave it in your checking account. It's not necessarily in your savings, but it's an account set aside for these emergencies. And here's the average. The average person encounters $2,000 a year of unexpected expenses. Maybe you need to put tires on the car, your air conditioner compressor goes out. I've had 2 of those experiences this summer where one of them went out and it's the whole system has to be replaced. Well, that was a big surprise. And then I had one just this past week. Once the guy got there, you kind of hope that it's really that capacitor. I don't know if you've been there before, but he said, oh, it's just the capacitor. And he called it the flux capacitor. But anyway, that is a cheap fix and the air conditioning was back on. So there's the extremes of things that can happen, but 2,000 expenses. If you're married or single with kids, that multiple becomes 4 or 5 times your monthly gross income that you will need. So that gives you a little bit of target there. Eliminating debt. Of course, Dave Ramsey is the big proponent of getting debt out of your life. And when you think about debt, how much should your credit card balance be at the end of every month? 0, okay? Now, people are using credit cards more and more and more, which is fine because it captures your spending. It's much easier to dispute claims. Your credit card companies take care of problems. And as long as you pay it off every month, that's great. But credit card debt is absolutely, I won't say absolutely the worst, I don't want to steal Debbie's thunder because she's going to talk a lot about debt. And it's not the worst, but it still is 16% and rising. And so you got to get that, squeeze that out of your life. But again, you may have a mortgage, and that's acceptable because you're building an asset that supposedly is increasing in value. And then an auto that is not increasing in value, the recommendation is don't have a loan over 3 years, which is tough because now they're extending them out 6 years. And the car may not even work by 72 months. And so it's tough. But no new cars, you ought to take that off the list. It's just not worth it to be buying new cars at any time anymore. All right. Engage your employee benefits. That's not really appropriate here at retirement, but when I'm teaching younger groups like our staff here, employee benefits are there, like your health savings account, your 403b, 401k. That is free money that your employer is handing you, and you need that. That's a great way to save money. And so we spend a lot of time on that. Enumerate your spending. You notice these are weird words, but it has to alliterate, right? Everyone starts with an E, but basically enumerate your spending, figure out what you're spending, then budget. We're going to spend some time on that dirty word of budgeting. And then finally, enforce family priorities. And what that means to retirees basically is you're going to need all the money that you can get because you don't know what's coming your way. So don't be free to be giving it out to grandchildren and things like that, because there'll be time for that at the end. You just don't know what your expenses are going to be. And so you've got to enforce family priorities, and it may be a younger crowd saving for college, things like that for their kids, but you've got to have a clear direction of what you're putting your money toward. And so that's really the basics of financial planning. All right, what financial planning does is it brings certainty to an uncertain future. So you can do it, all right? Financial planning can be done. You have no idea what cards you're going to be dealt, but you can work on stacking the deck, if you will. And so you've got to pay attention to what's going on in your life. Now, tracking your financial net worth progress, this is really a corporate calculation. A corporation has net worth, and that's what investors look at. What is this company worth? And you can also do that on an individual side. Basically, net worth is assets minus liabilities. You take all of your assets and what they're worth, you subtract your credit card debt, your mortgage, your student loans, other loans. So it's what you have versus minus what you owe, okay? And that gives you a net worth. Now, you may have a negative net worth, all right? You owe more than things are worth. Now, people tend to value things that we'll talk about end-of-life planning in a couple of weeks, but they say, well, I've got this furniture. Well, guess what? Your furniture isn't worth very much. Especially the millennials don't care about heavy furniture and dinette sets and things like that. They buy all their stuff from IKEA because they know how to put it together, and we don't. And but anyway, they tend to overvalue their furniture and even the car that's 10 years old and so forth. But it's really the home, the money, the investments, things like that. So there's your little calculation down at the bottom of this slide. You multiply your age times your realized pre-tax annual household income. So in other words, if it's just Social Security, you take your gross Social Security, maybe a pension, and so you multiply your age times that, and then you divide by 10, okay? And at your age, that is what your net worth should be. And so it's really a target, so I don't want people to get discouraged. Just be aware that changes may be required in your life because basically there's only two things you can affect as you retire. You can figure out ways to get more income. That's why certain seniors are having to go back to work. We have a very robust program here teaching people computer skills and so forth that are valuable to the marketplace. Or you can reduce your expenses. Those are the only things. You got to reduce your expenses or increase your income. And so again, that's just a checkpoint. And again, usually it's one that you do as you're growing through life and use that. There may be not much you can do at this point, but you can know what your worth is. All right, here's some quotes for you. Here's our Warren Buffett again. Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after savings. So we're going to talk about what you can put aside. Playing the lottery is not a good strategy. Okay, it's a fantasy. It's fun owning the tickets and dreaming about what you're going to do, but the odds of you ever winning are slim and none. And there's not many rich uncles around without kids. And though there are getting more and more because people are choosing not to have children, but there's a few of them out there, but everyone's not guaranteed a rich uncle. Again, there's only two items that can be adjusted, and that's income and expenses. So whatever your income, always live below your means, okay? Live below your means, not above your means. Here's that dirty word, budget. And how many of you have tried to budget over the years, get very frustrated, it's full of failure and so forth. But here's the quote, a budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went, okay? You need to take control of the money inflow and where it's going, all right? Now, that frustration comes because you don't do it right. You just say, okay, I'm going to budget, I'm going to spend this much and so forth, but you've got to do something first. You've got to figure out where your money is currently going. And so there's an exercise that you need to take 3 or 4 months. And what we recommend is that you get out your bank statement, which used to have the majority of your expenses, and get out your credit card statement, all right? And between the two of those, it pretty much captures everything you're spending money on. Because over 3-4 months, you're capturing the quarterly expense that maybe your auto policies on that, your auto insurance policy and so forth. But you need to capture all the places your money is going. And it's only then that you have the tools to budget. And so you can do it a couple of ways. You know, the old Dave Ramsey approach is do it on a cash basis, put those money in envelopes. And I don't know how safe that is walking around today. But a lot of people use the envelope system. But there's another way to do it. If you would go through an exercise, and what you do is you need to get 2 colored markers, maybe one yellow, one pink, and take out your bank statements and your credit cards, and then start highlighting in one color all your needs. I've got to pay my housing, I've got to pay my rent, I've got to pay property tax and things like that. But guess what's not on that list? You know, Starbucks, cable TV, things you're spending money on, maybe excessive restaurant, fast food, and so forth. But you'll see where your money's going. So once you see where your money's going, then that'll be a wake-up call that you can change some things in your life. But otherwise, you can't do it. So I really recommend that you go through that process with those 2 colored highlighters and really get a feel for where your money is going before you try to budget. All right, wealth is more often the result of a lifestyle of hard work, perseverance, planning, and most of all, self-discipline. That's why we hate budgeting, because it requires self-discipline, all right, very frankly. And this quote came from The Millionaire Next Door. And, you know, Debbie and I had a client together one time, this couple, and, you know, I don't want to tell you too many stories, but they had $4 million that they'd accumulated. We were just shocked. A very plain couple, and we started talking to them. Well, do y'all go out to restaurants? No, we never go out to restaurants. Where do you vacation? They never go on vacations. So this was the most unexciting couple I think we had ever met. They did nothing but save their money, okay? And so now that, and we were kind of stunned, what do you want us to do? You know, you've got $4 million. Well, as we probed and probed, we find out he's dying of cancer. And he was worried how his wife was going to spend the money. And we had to tell him, none of your business. She may want to start traveling. She may want to take cruises, things like that. But anyway, but it's amazing how many people do have money because they've lived a different kind of lifestyle. And that's why they call it The Millionaire Next Door. You have no idea what people may have been saving. But that self-discipline is the thing that causes us to stumble the most. And I love that Hebrews 12:11 scripture down there. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but it's painful. But it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. So budgeting is painful. All right, here's a tool for you, and I think I passed that out to you. This is the retirement income stool, all right? And I gave you a picture of that. And this is a handy tool to use because it really gets down to it's all about income, all right? And we all know how a 3-legged stool works. It doesn't work very well when there's only two legs, and it doesn't work at all, in fact. And so, again, a three-legged stool is very important. So one leg is Social Security, and you pretty much know by now if you reach full retirement age or if you waited or didn't wait, and you've gotten to the point where you know exactly what your Social Security is coming in. You're hoping for big raises every year, and that gives you your start at your income. They never intended Social Security be your end-all income, your total income. It was supposed to be a safety net, all right? But it has become very important to just about every senior as they age. The rule of thumb that shouldn't be more than 40% of your monthly income. But again, that's a rule of thumb. We're not all the same and so forth. That second leg is sources of income otherwise. And that may be that you were fortunate enough to earn some pensions over the years coming in. Maybe you had some annuities that are producing some income. There's wages. Maybe you've had to go back to work. Maybe you've got a side gig to produce some income. Maybe you have some rental properties. It's not uncommon for us to see oil properties, especially people from East Texas. A lot of that drilling craze, and families have inherited oil royalties over the years. And so there's a monthly income that fluctuates very dramatically depending upon the price of oil at the time. But all of that produces a monthly income. And then you see that third leg is all the assets that you may own. Home equity. And again, home equity is the amount of the value of the house, market value, less any debt, mortgage that you may own. And that's some equity that may have to be sold at some time. There's savings that you've put aside. There's investments. Again, the 401k, 403b, IRAs. And these are things that eventually may have to be used to make up the shortfall in budgeting when you retire. So again, it's all about the inflow of income that you need to live comfortably. And so these things may have to be liquidated. So this is my wife and I fill this thing out every year because it gives you a nice net worth. I say my wife and I fill it out, and she goes, oh, that's nice. You know, goes, and but it's a good picture of where you are right at the moment, of where my income's coming from, and what assets do I have that may have to be liquidated to make up that shortfall. So it's a good exercise. That's why I put it in your hands. This is the funnel, if you will, of everything that goes into retirement savings and the leaks in your bucket. You know, your bucket is leaking, and a lot of that is taxation, inflation, again, those emergencies that you weren't expecting, the stock market volatility. So you had all those plans of things to go into your funnel for retirement income, and there may be some leaking going on there in that. So, all right, towards the end, it all comes down to health and housing. That's the cloud that is out there that people don't really plan for, is am I going to have long-term care? And again, we're getting more and more people are living single today than ever before. We have a lot of family of people that chose not to have children a while back, and so they reach up into their 80s. Now there's a good chance they're going to make it to 85, and they look around and they don't have anyone. Their friends are gone, they've predeceased them and things like that. We get calls about once a month, who's going to be my power of attorney, who's going to be my executor, because they don't have that structure that a lot of people have. So we have to deal with people living by themselves. But again, long-term care is a big problem. And you know, Medicare is going to take care of your expenses when you go into the hospital and you have an operation, you break your hip, and then you go into rehab and they pay up to so much to pay that. And then you go home and you're able to live, you know, longer at home by yourself. But at some point in time, that cycle breaks down, because if you're by yourself, you're no longer able to live alone. And so you have to go into long-term care, and if you know the expenses of that, it's very, very expensive. The percentage of people needing long-term care, activities of daily living, you know, bathing, feeding, dressing, so forth, is about 60%. You're going to have an experience where you need some long-term care. Medicare is not in the long-term care business. They're not in the room and board business. They are in the health business, but they're not in the rent-paying business, okay? And so who's going to pay for that? The good news is there's average is only 2.6 years in long-term care, and the majority of it is covered by family in one way or another, in terms of 60%, oh, mom can come live with us, and so forth. And so family is traditionally taking care of the majority of it, but some people don't have that option. And so everybody wants to age in place. We see that all the time, but at some point in time, you may not be able to age in place, and then that cycle breaks. And so you have to pay for staying, paying for staying. And so only 10% of the population has long-term care policies. They're very, very expensive, and if you didn't buy them by the time you were 55, it's probably too late. And so you've got to do it out of your current assets or go on to Medicaid. We do a lot of counseling about this, so that's part of our counseling process. You should have questions about Social Security. Social Security is very complex, 2,700 plus rules. We got our big 8.7%. I say I'm on Social Security, how about that? And so you reach full retirement age and you can start getting that income. Cost of living adjustment was 8.7%. It's the biggest one in many, many, many years. They're looking at now, it's probably going to be right at about 3% for 2024. So you can expect a raise there. One of the things that's being discussed in Washington is it's all calculated on the Consumer Price Index for workers. That has nothing to do with seniors. That's what E stands for, elderly. And so there's a big push to get Social Security switched over to CPI-E. And because it recognizes a lot more of what we deal with, the medical expenses and things like that, because we don't have the transportation costs and other things that the people on wages do. And so a lot of people don't realize that Social Security can become taxable when you reach a certain amount of income. To save Social Security, Ronald Reagan, back in 1984, instituted this. There's a 50%, your 50% of your Social Security becomes taxable if you reach a certain level of income. Well, then in 1994, along came Clinton, and he turned it into 85%. So a lot of people that are still making good income, they get shocked that their Social Security is taxable. And the real shame is it was only supposed to affect 10% of the people when it was implemented, and they put these brackets in place. Well, as we've seen what inflation has done since 1984, did those brackets rise too? No, they didn't. So more and more seniors are getting taxed. It's now up to 53% of all seniors receiving Social Security now pay some taxes on their Social Security. And so that's a crime in itself that really should have been fixed. But the question is, Social Security needs to be saved. And you're going to hear more and more about this. You can't kick this can down the road much longer. Here's 3 ideas that are out there. Increase the full retirement age. It's pretty much 67 right now for most people. Otherwise, you're taking a lesser amount. Increase payroll taxes. They haven't been increased since 1996. And so, again, a lot of things have happened since then. And so should more payroll taxes. And then a lot of people don't realize that once you reach this year $160,200 worth of payroll, you quit having Social Security FICA deducted from your paycheck. So richer people in income actually get a raise about halfway through the year or whatever. And so they're saying this is ridiculous. And so they want to make Social Security taxable for all the way up. If you're going to make $5 million a year, we want to take out the Social Security from that. So those are all proposals to save it. And I always get questions about, is Social Security going to make it? Investment basics, here's some ideas for you. Not timing the market, but time in the market. For retired seniors right now, this is a very dangerous time. We haven't had a serious decline in the market for some time, except 2008, some dramatic things, and it bounced right back. But here's a thought for you. When you reach my age, our age, the return of principal becomes more important than the return on principal. So in other words, if I'm going to invest $100,000 in something, what is my guarantee that I'm going to get that $100,000 back? So just to put $100,000 in the market, it may turn into $80,000 if the market declines. If I put it in a CD then I'm guaranteed, the FDIC is going to guarantee I'm going to get my money back when it matures. And so as you age, that return of the principal becomes more important than the rate I'm actually getting, okay? So you get more and more conservative, and again, I'll just use myself as a perfect example. And it used to be the 65-35 rule, that once you reach 65, 65% of your money should be in bonds and fixed income, 35% in equities. And but with inflation, you need a little bit more exposure to equities and the long-term return on those. So what I tend to do is I take my money and put it in buckets. And so I have my conservative buckets up front. I want that all guaranteed. I don't want to worry about losing money in that amount of money in those buckets. And my end bucket is what I'm risking in the stock market, and that's if I reach 95, like 1 in 10, and I may not reach there. But so I don't really care what the market does, because when you look at the stock market, and let's see, I'm going the right direction. You know, when you look at the start of the stock market up to today, it looks like this. Why would I not invest in the stock market? But what it disguises is the roller coaster, okay, of the rises and falls to get to that point. And so if you have this big gap down while you're retired, you know, you don't have time to make that up over time. And so that's why I put my equities in a bucket out there, because I may not need it, all right? And that's why I don't watch the stock market every day, because I don't really care. I'm investing like a 45-year-old because I don't need that money, okay, hopefully, you know, until the end. So that's just an idea for you there. Good investing is boring, it's consistent. Let me give you, and again, I use this with younger people, but dollar cost averaging, saving, putting money in the market, whatever. If you put $500 per month for 20 years, okay, $500 a month that you set aside in investing, whether it's saving, CDs, or whatever, that's $120,000 at the end of 20 years that you've set aside. And it goes back to those earlier slides, you know, save first, then spend, okay? And so you do that, and normal returns, you'd have $375,000, you know, at the end, because that money is compounding, it's growing, you're not touching it, you're not spending it, and so forth. So the magic of compound interest, the eighth wonder of the world, but you got to get saving, get people to do that. But there's a lot of problems as you're maturing as a family, and again, that gets back to those family priorities. And am I saving for 529 plans for college, things like that. But you want low fees, diversification, know what you own and know why you own it, okay? If you're going to Starbucks every week, why not own Starbucks? You can tell they're making money, all right, things like that. And then insurance is not an investment, all right? Do not think that an insurance policy is an investment. It's there for crisis, and that crisis can be your house burning down, your automobile, life insurance. The crisis is you die, okay? And so once your kids are out and you're retired, what is the crisis, all right? And the crisis period is over, so that you shouldn't be investing too much money in insurance policies for life, okay? Investment scams and frauds. We heard about Bernie Madoff, $17.5 billion Ponzi scheme. Be very careful who you're trusting. We had our own Bernie Madoff here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Doc Gallagher, $30 million. He would, Saturday morning radio, talk about annuities and things like that, and he was actually stealing the money. And so a lot of people trusted him. This was one of our first referrals of the Elder Financial Safety Center, and the DA got 25 years for him. Tarrant County came behind us and got him for life. And, all right, RMD, I don't know if this is the interest of any of you, but when you do reach a certain age and you have money that have been in tax-deferred accounts like IRAs and 401ks, the government makes you start to take some of that money out of those tax protected accounts, and it just, they just want to tax it. You know, I had a lady sitting in front of me one day, and she says, well, that's the money that they're making me spend every year out of my required minimum distribution. And I said, spend? you don't have to spend it. You just have to take it out of your IRA, get it taxed, and put it over here in savings. And she goes, don't tell my husband that. He thinks I have to spend it. So, but the good news is it was 70 and a half. Trump came in with Secure Act 1.0 and changed that age to 72. And then Biden at the last day of the year last year put in Secure 2.0, and now it's 73. And so if you're younger than those ages, you've been given some relief there. But it does happen, and we can counsel you on that. And going back to Social Security, we do counsel Debbie and I on claiming strategies, when you should take your Social Security and so forth. So I meant to mention that. We can also talk about required minimum distributions, because there is a way you can make charitable donations out of your IRA that will take care of some of this, and you can make it direct. So in other words, you can tell Fidelity, instead of sending the money to me, send it over to my church for my tithe, and then that just reduces your tax liability. So especially since nobody itemizes deductions pretty much anymore, less than 10% of taxpayers do. So you don't get the benefit of your tax deductible donation, so you might as well take them out of your RMD. So watch out for boomerang kids. I tell people all the time, and mainly this is people I'm talking to in the 50s and early 60s. You hear that term, significant other. Significant other. Well, if you're helping out a grandchild buying their car and co-signing notes, it stands for sign if I can't. Okay, same word. And it rarely ends well. We have a lot of grandmas that just come to us saying, what do I do? You know, she's not making her car payment like she said she was. And I said, well, it's easy. Just let them repo it. You don't need a credit score anymore. You're fine. You're not borrowing money. And but we have to counsel people how to get through that. That gets back to that enforced family priorities. And so what's the best gift you can give your children? That's to take care of your own needs so they don't have to, okay? Everybody worries about, oh, what are my kids going to inherit? Well, they don't want to inherit your long-term care. And so you need to take care of that yourself, have that money set aside. You know, if maybe the house is they're going to leave to the kids, but again, we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks, end-of-life planning. And then finally, we always talk about Texas unclaimed property. There's a process here in Texas called escheatment that if people can't find you, corporations, so forth, they have to turn that money over to the state, and the state doesn't want it. They want you to have it, okay? Deposits, utility deposits, things like that. You can go on Claim It Texas. It's the state Secretary of State site, and they used to publish it in the Dallas Morning News. You may not remember that, where you saw names and stuff. Now it's on the internet. You can go in there, look yourself up, and we have a 20% hit rate. We put all of our clients through that filter, and we find money for 20% of the clients. And it may be a deposit of $50, but money is money. And it becomes a fun hobby because you can put anybody's name in there. You can put your neighbor's name in there, people at your church, put your pastor's name in there, and I guarantee you, you're going to get a 20% hit rate. I've left my cards up here if you want to take one of those, so we'd be happy to counsel with you.
There is an insurance company that does once a year just a quick survey to determine the amount of debt or the number of households that are carrying debt. What they have determined is 33% of monthly income goes to debt repayment in about a third of these households. 33% is a fairly significant number. It may not seem like a lot, but what that tells me is when you're thinking about a house payment, your mortgage lender does not want you spending more than 31% of your income on your mortgage. So if you have 33% of your monthly income that is going just to debt repayment, and this doesn't include your mortgage, that's a pretty big number. You're spending more on your debt payments than you are on your housing expense. So that's pretty significant. I was doing some reading this morning before coming up here. Prior to the pandemic or during the pandemic when it started, the survey found that households were starting to pay down some debt, that trend is now changing. There are more households now that are carrying at least $10,000 worth of debt in credit cards. About 40% in partnered households, about 40% of those are not discussing that debt with their partners. They're keeping that a secret. And so a lot of people refinanced their mortgages when the rates went really low, so they took advantage of these really low mortgage rates, which is something to kind of, it's bragging rights, but on the opposite side, having credit card debt has now become something nobody wants to discuss. It's kind of an embarrassing thing. And with the Fed increasing rates, now that's going to impact your credit cards. And so you're going to see your payments are going up just because your interest rates have gone up. So if you are carrying credit card debt, I would encourage you to look at ways that you can address that debt. And if you're not sure what your options are, we're going to kind of talk about those today. So what does debt do? Well, it stifles major goals. So if you are younger and it's your goal to purchase a home for your family, carrying credit card debt can slow that process down. It also can stifle your goal of maybe going to school. If your goal is to get an education and you have debt, maybe you can't afford to pay tuition, or maybe you can't afford to send your child to college. It can impact your ability to be able to save for retirement because you're paying for debt. So credit card debt or debt of any kind, especially unsecured debt, can stifle the ability to achieve some of those major goals. So what can we do? Well, we can get educated. Education is definitely the key. There are tons of websites, personal finance sites that you can go to and read up on this. As I mentioned before, the Federal Trade Commission, they have a wonderful section for consumers where you can go and get pretty much any information that you would like about consumer issues. And also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is another great place to go to get information and education. Okay, so in the past we've heard the definitions about good debt and bad debt. So let's kind of talk about those. Good debt, does anybody have any idea what the difference might be, or a definition of good debt? What's an example of good debt? House, mortgage, okay. Good, okay. What about bad debt? What's considered bad debt? Everything else. Okay. Well, I'm going to add one more to your list of good debt. It's been said that taking on debt to advance your education, so student loans, would be considered good debt. Okay, so we've talked about the good, we've talked about the bad, now let's talk about the ugly. When I asked what was bad debt, pretty much everyone said anything else other than a mortgage. All right, so we know credit card debt is bad. Your interest rates on credit card can vary depending on, it could be as low as 0% if you're fortunate to have one of those introductory offers. It could be as high as maybe 35%. And that's just your interest only. If you happen to go over your limit, or if you happen to miss a payment, you get a late fee, you get an over limit fee, so that impacts the overall amount that you're paying for that debt. And we know that those interest rates are rising now. One of the best places that you can go to get a credit card with a lower interest rate would be through maybe a credit union. And also having good credit helps you to get credit cards that are on a lower interest rate. So pawn shops. Some people may not think of pawn shops as being a loan, but it is. And when you take an item in to pawn, and then you have to come back and make a payment to keep it from getting put out for sale, and that's a loan. And the interest rate on that is anywhere from 80% to triple digits, higher triple digits, by the time you pay it off and get it out. So, rent to own, that is also high interest rate. When you think about purchasing an appliance, say maybe a refrigerator, what would that appliance cost you if you went to Home Depot, Lowe's, some other appliance store, and just purchased it outright for cash, compared to what you're going to pay over time when you do rent to own? The cost of that appliance is probably going to triple what you end up paying for it. Has anyone ever taken advantage of those rapid refunds at tax time? I have. I was single, I had a couple of kids, and I was getting an earned income credit, and I wanted that money now. And so I got my rapid refund. But when you do that, you end up giving up some of your refund. So if you get it in a day or 2 days, they're going to take part of that money as their finance charge right off the refund. So they're loaning you the money, and then when the refund comes in, they take it. They take the rest of it. So if you're getting $3,000 back, they may give you $2,800. May not seem like much. Right then, $2,800 is a lot, and that extra $200 doesn't seem like very much. But think about what that extra $200 could do for you if you just waited maybe 2 weeks to get it. Payday loans, anyone had one of those? Fortunately, that's one path I haven't taken, but I talked to a lot of clients who have. Hard to get out of payday loan debt. It is an awful cycle. So there are some states that have taken some efforts or put efforts in place to cap the amount that payday loan lenders can charge. Texas is not one of those states. Texas has the highest average payday loan interest rate of anybody. We are at 664% is what our APR is on an average payday loan. And some people say, well, isn't that against the law? That's like being a loan shark. Well, it's not against the law. And when you look at a payday loan, the interest rate listed may not be that high. But when you talk about the APR and all of those other charges associated with it, you think about going to make a payment on your payday loan and you can't pay the full amount, so you pay the interest. And then after about 4 or 5 payments, you still haven't paid it off, so you have to refinance it. And then they charge you $250 to refinance it. So you may have started off with a $300 loan and you refinance it, now it's about $550, and you didn't get much cash back when you refinanced it. And so that's how you get to the point to where you're paying about 664% for that $300 loan. And then finally, title loans. You own your car, your truck, boat, RV. You take your title in. You need some quick cash. You take your title in to Title Max or some other place, and you get $1,000, $3,000. You have to come back and pay that full amount in a month. One payment plus some interest. And if you can't do that within the next month, that's fine. We'll accept your interest payment. We'll extend this note out. And then you get to a point to where you can't keep that up any longer. It's impacting your ability to pay rent. It's impacting your ability to be able to buy groceries, get medical care, pay for prescriptions, pay your utilities. If you want to go the route of a title loan, Just be prepared to lose the vehicle, or be prepared to ask family and friends to help you get out of that. So, here we do a lot of frauds and scams education. One thing to know is that there's a lot of frauds and scams about debt collection. And so you just need to be able to be aware of what the signs are and what to do. You'll see in your resource guide on page 40, there is an activity that you can do. If you don't recognize the phone number that's coming in on your phone, just don't answer it. That's pretty much a standard practice for any scam. Debt collection, romance scam, you've won money, whatever it is. Just don't even answer the phone. If it's important, they'll leave a message. If it's not, they'll move on. So what are your options when you have debt and you're dealing with it and it's just become overwhelming? What can you do? So one option may not be the best one, and I will tell you up front, not all of these options are going to be good. Some of these options are not even going to be viable options depending on your budget. So you can continue to self-pay just like you have been. Maybe it's paying the minimum amount that's due every month by the due date. You're not making much progress, but at least you're not late. You're not getting a late fee, and it's still appearing on your credit report as a on-time payment. It's just that you're not making progress in paying down the debt. So another option you could do is you could call the lender, whether that is Chase Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, maybe it's a Macy's card, Belk, Kohl's. You can call them and ask them if they have any internal hardship programs. So internal hardship programs are either short-term or long-term, and they usually result in, if approved, they result in a reduction in the interest rate and a lower payment, or a lower payment, or both. If it's long-term and you can afford that, just know that you're going to have to pay that debt off according to the terms that they set up, and you will not have use of that line of credit again until you pay the debt off. So won't be able to go Christmas shopping and use it while you're on an internal hardship. One of the things that the lender's going to ask is for financial information. They're going to go through basically a budget before they agree to set up an internal hardship program, just to make sure that you can make the payment. They don't want to set you up to fail. Believe it or not, they don't want to set you up to fail. So if you can't afford the payment under an internal hardship program, they won't offer it. So what about debt consolidation loan? It's an option. If you can get approved for that, the biggest thing with a debt consolidation loan is that it really needs to be enough to pay off all of those higher interest credit cards or other debts. And you have to be disciplined to make the payment on the debt consolidation loan without getting further into debt by starting to charge on those cards again. That's one of the biggest things I've seen with clients who have tried to consolidate their loans, is the real issue hasn't been resolved, and the real issue is there's insufficient income to cover all of the expenses, and so they start falling back into debt again. Debt management plans, these are offered by legitimate nonprofit organizations. The goal is to get you out of debt in 5 years or less. Legitimate nonprofit debt management programs are usually lower interest rates and or lower payments. The debt management agency does charge a fee, but it's usually not very much. And they usually offer counseling either at no cost or maybe $20 or so for a counseling.
Who gives you those? A bank, or where do you go?
If you wanted to call somebody, I can give you the numbers. You can also go to NFCC, National Foundation for Credit Counseling.org, and you can get connected to a legitimate nonprofit that provides counseling. Debt settlement companies are another option. I do not recommend them. So debt settlement companies, a lot of these you'll see advertised on TV, maybe in the middle of the day, maybe late at night. National Debt Relief, Financial Freedom, some of those. They tell you that they're going to reduce your debt by 50%, up to 50%. What happens is debt settlement, if you are current on your payments, they're going to tell you stop paying and send money to them. That's going to take a toll on your credit when you stop those payments. They're going to take your money and set it aside, and then they'll tell you we're going to come in and negotiate. Well, number one, your creditor doesn't have to negotiate if they don't want to. They could end up suing you for the debt. And debt settlement companies charge high fees. I had a client once who did end up getting sued by one of her creditors. She was not getting statements. They were available. You had to log in to your profile to see your monthly statements, but she wasn't doing that. When we looked at her statements for 18 months, what she paid in and what was attributed to various fees was 41%. So bankruptcy is an option, and typically bankruptcy should be done as an option to wipe the slate clean and give you a fresh start. There are two types. There's Chapter 7 for personal bankruptcy and Chapter 13. 13 is typically a repayment plan, and that's usually done when somebody is behind, like on a house note, and they're trying to get caught up. And to find out if you are eligible for a Chapter 7 or if you would have to do a Chapter 13, an attorney would determine that for you. Typically, it's based on what the area median income is for the area for the past 6 months. And so really and truly, I guess you could self-represent in a bankruptcy case. I wouldn't recommend it. If you're going to do it, get it done right. So, and finally, the last thing you can do is just ignore the debts. Not pay them, not talk to them. Obviously, that's not going to help you with your credit reports. Many of these options are not going to help with your credit report. Some are going to be less damaging. A debt management plan is going to be less damaging. Internal hardship, probably less damaging. But there comes a time when sometimes we just have to say, I can't keep doing this madness any longer. And if it means that you're on Social Security and you have to pay your housing expense, your transportation expense, your utilities, your food, and your health care, and there's not anything left over for debt repayment, that may be the time when you just got to make a clean break and say, I can't do this anymore. What is credit? Borrowing money. Yeah. Yeah. So it's the use of other people's money to do something that you want to do. Buy something you want to buy, get a service. So it's the ability of a customer to obtain goods or services before payment based on the trust that payment will be made in the future. There's a good word, trust. How do we know how to trust someone? You know, if one of your kids, a grandkid, somebody came to you, a neighbor, a friend said, hey, can I borrow some money? Are you going to kind of do a little assessment in your head? Can I trust that they're going to pay me back? And how would you determine that? What makes them trustworthy? History? Okay, good. So some of their past behaviors, whether it's how they've managed money in the past or maybe just other things, can give you an insight as to whether or not they're trustworthy. So there's a difference between credit reports and credit scores. A credit report is a statement that has the information about your credit activity and current credit situation, such as loan paying history and status of your accounts. So this is just all of the data that comes in. You know, it's what your creditors have, if they've received a payment from you, then they're going to report, we've received a payment this month. They're going to report how much you still owe on the account. If anything was late, they'll report it was late. So it's just data. That's all it is. And all of that data can be used to come up with what's called a credit score. So a credit score is a number calculated based on the information in your credit report and used by lenders to predict how likely you are to repay a loan on time. Usually it's a 3-digit number, and depending on what type of scoring model is being used, it could be as low as 300, it could be as high as maybe 900. Does anybody have any idea what the most recognizable scoring model might be? We hear it all the time on TV. Get your what score? Get your FICO score? Yeah, find out what your FICO score is. So that's one of the most popular ones that's used. And let me tell you, there's not just one FICO score. There's a bunch of them. Because they started with a FICO score, I think it was back in 1989 maybe. And it has progressed, but some lenders got used to the original one and that's what they want to stick with. And then there was another one that came out called Vantage. And Vantage is Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion all came together and created kind of like a competitor score to the FICO. FICO is going to be 300 to 850. Vantage is going to be, I think, 300 to 900. So when somebody says my score is 900 or my score is 875, they're probably talking about a Vantage score. But if you have a high Vantage score, you're probably going to have a high FICO score. And your FICO score today is not going to be the same as your FICO score tomorrow. Your FICO score when you apply for a mortgage today and your FICO score when you go to apply for a car loan today is not going to be the same. And the reason is because lenders can ask for proprietary type of scoring models created for them that will weight different things more heavily that's important to them. A mortgage lender is going to care more about how you've paid your rent, mortgages in the past. A car lender is going to care more about how you've paid your car notes in the past, your installment loans. They may not care how you paid your credit cards. So back to that word of trust. How is trust determined? So there's the 4 C's of credit, and some people could even go so far as to say there's 5 C's of credit. The 4 C's of credit are going to be character, capacity, capital, collateral, and if you want to add the 5th one, you could say conditions. Character. Character is determined by your actions, correct? So you had mentioned that how they've paid something in the past, that's an action. You're going to determine if that person is trustworthy by how they may have paid something in the past. So a credit score the biggest factor that that determines your credit score is how you've paid in the past, your payment history. It accounts for about 35% of your payment or of your credit score is your payment history. So that's how you build character on a credit report. Pay the bills on time. How do you build capacity? Or what is capacity? Capacity is your ability to pay. What is your capacity? It is basically your income compared to what you owe. Do you have the capacity to pay the debt? So sometimes you'll hear lenders talk about debt to income ratios. That is, how much money do you have coming in compared to how much money you're paying towards just your debts. So if you have the capacity to pay, that works to your advantage. It raises your credit score. One of the things you want to avoid is carrying too much debt. If you are getting to a point where you are carrying 30% or more in debt compared to your income, you're starting to get into the danger zone. And you need to really think about, how am I gonna stop this? How am I gonna change the direction? Capital is gonna be your skin in the game. What am I bringing to the table? So when you buy a home, you are putting down a down payment usually. A lot of times when you're purchasing a car, you're putting a down payment on it. Maybe you're trading another car in, or you're bringing cash. So the more skin in the game you have, the better your conditions are. The better able you are to get a lower interest rate. Collateral is going to be the lender's, what they can take back if you don't pay. So if you are purchasing a car, your car is going to be the collateral. If you don't make that payment, after about the third missed payment, they're coming to hook it up to the tow truck. And they're taking it away. If you don't make your mortgage payment, they can foreclose on your home and take it. If it's an IRS debt, they can place liens on your property. They can seize your bank accounts, things like that. So that's your collateral. And then conditions, the fifth C would be, what are the terms of the loan? So your lender's going to ask questions about, what do you want the money for? How much do you want? How long do you want it? How much are you willing to pay an interest rate to get it? So those are going to be the conditions. And the conditions, all of those together will kind of determine what your payment's going to be. And then they're going to say, okay, now can this person afford that payment? So if your interest rate is high, you can't afford as much. If it's a shorter term loan, you may not be able to afford as much. 15-year note on a house, higher payment than a 30-year note. So that's those are the things that they're looking at. And these are the ways that they determine trust, and these are some of the things that will contribute to your credit score. Okay, so what is important about credit? I like to say that this is your financial resume. If you are applying for a job, and this is an employer that you've never met before, this is not a friend, not somebody you know, you've sent in your resume and they've looked over that resume, and based on what they see on that, they're deciding if you're a good candidate for the job or not. Well, your credit report is your financial resume. Your lender may not know you, and so they're using the information that has been supplied to the credit bureaus to determine if you're a good risk, you're a good credit risk or not. And so keeping a nice financial resume and keeping it, as clean as possible. We all know that there's going to be times where we are going to suffer some type of financial hardship. Our credit report may take a hit, but that can heal. But it is what tells the lender and some employers whether you're a good candidate for a loan or for a job. Your credit determines what you pay for items. So a good credit score means you pay less interest, lower finance charges over time. A low credit score means that you're going to pay a higher interest rate. So, and that over time can affect your financial health, you know, in the long run. It might determine where you live. You know, I would love to be able to live in the rich part of town, but I can't. I don't have that kind of income. I can't afford $1 million home. So I live in Red Oak. You know, yeah, yeah, I live in the country. I love Red Oak. No, I don't mean to badmouth Red Oak. I love Red Oak. But you know, I'm not going to be living in some high-priced place because I can't afford it. I can't afford that type of loan. It might determine where you work. So we talked about that financial resume. Employers do background checks. Many of them do. They don't get all of the information on your credit report, but the information that they do get can help them determine, it reveals some behaviors, and it can determine if you're going to be a good candidate for the job. So if you're looking, or if you're applying for a job in the financial industry, whether it's banking, insurance, or if you're applying for a government job that's going to require a security clearance, what's on your credit report may tell them not a good candidate, or it may tell them this is an excellent candidate. Also, it can determine what you drive, and I have to say that with tongue in cheek because I know that we have had clients who have been approved for car loans that they never should have been approved for. And it's sad because we see somebody take a car in for a repair to the dealership, and before you know it, they've traded that car in and they have walked out with a new car. They didn't need a new car. They just went in for some maintenance that might have cost them a couple $100, and now they're walking out with a $900 payment. There you go. Yes. Yes. Yes, they will. Because their job is to sell a car. They're trying to put food on their table too. So you just have to recognize it, and like you said, yeah, tell them no.
Well, I drive a Lexus,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody says, oh, you drive a Lexus. Well, my Lexus is 2005, and they didn't change the body style until 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody thinks I have a new Lexus, and I don't.
Yeah, yeah. And I bet that, yeah, and I bet that Lexus is nice because you don't have a payment on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and then it can also affect other monthly bills, your utilities, your insurance. And when I say utilities, probably won't apply to most of us here because we've already had service with our water company, our electric company. But for our young family members who are just starting out, maybe they don't have any credit, they're going to probably end up having to pay a deposit to get electric service, water service, gas service. So no credit, you may have to start establishing it through those ways. Also, we talked about behaviors. And so insurance companies do look at credit reports, and sometimes what they see on there indicates some behaviors, and that could change what you pay. All right, so this one just talks about I mentioned earlier that your payment history accounts for about 35% of your credit score. The next most important item is, what do you owe? How much? This is your utilization, credit utilization. 30% of your score is looking at how much of your credit are you using. So if you have a total amount that's available to you of $10,000 and you have used 3,000 of it, or less than 3,000, you're doing pretty good. If you have 10,000 available in credit and you've used 10,000, not so good. You have maxed out your credit utilization, and that's going to impact your credit score. Length of credit history is about 15%, so a lot of people want to transfer balances and take advantage of lower interest rates. I get that, I understand it. Keep in mind, if you've had a credit card account since you got out of college and it's in good standing, don't close that account. Keep it going. So, new credit. Yes, ma'am. They will close it, yes. So use it, pay it off, use it, pay it off. But yeah, you're right. They will close it for inactivity.
If they want you to use, they want you to be in debt. Why would they come up with a thing wrong?
Yeah. New credit accounts for about 10%. So, in other words, if you are applying for credit, they're looking at those inquiries. So you have soft inquiries, you have hard inquiries. Hard inquiries are the ones that affect your credit. Those are the ones where you are actively applying for credit. Soft inquiries are when you check your credit report, when your current credit card companies are just reviewing your credit report, which they can do. You've given them the permission to do that. That's a soft inquiry. Your insurance company checking your credit report, that's a soft inquiry. Those do not affect your credit your credit score. But when you go at Christmas time and you apply for that Kohl's card, that Home Depot card, that's a hard inquiry, and that it will have a small impact on your credit score. Those stay on your credit for 2 years. And finally, types of credit accounts for 10%. It's good to have a mix, maybe an installment loan, a little credit card, a mortgage. I'm not saying that's permission to go out right now and go apply for a credit card if you don't have one. If you've managed this long without one, no need to do it now. But for those people who are working and they're paying a mortgage, they're maybe making a car payment, that mix does help. But you can see it's insignificant. It's about 10%. Okay. These are just some resources that you can use. Annualcreditreport.com, Federal Trade Commission I mentioned earlier, consumerfinance.gov, and then United Way has one here, mymoneydfw.com, and honestly, AARP. They have a ton of really good information about personal finance and things like that. So, and then come sign up for my class.